The only way that has ever been discovered to have a lot of people cooperate together voluntarily is through the free market, and that's why it's so essential to preserving individual freedom. Milton Friedman. This is Citadelium, episode 13, and I'm your host, Yuri Degaya. Today I would like to talk about parallel societies. And before I plunge into this topic, I wanted to revisit one of the articles that I wrote for my blog a while ago called Bitcoins to Economies. So, what does this article talk about? In general, it talks about the forming Bitcoin economy, how the Bitcoin economy is going actually to take over the world, and how it will actually split into two different economies that will actually run parallel to each other. So, what do I mean by Bitcoin splitting into two different economies? Actually, we can see it happening right now. As you can see, there's a bunch of companies out there who are not only following regulation but are also pro-regulation, and they want the government and the intergovernmental organizations to be involved in this industry. And these are the companies that usually engage in things like blockchain analytics and some brokerage and services, some exchange services, and all kinds of trading activity like futures and options trading. These companies are normally founded by people who come from the traditional finance background. So it's no wonder that they basically possess this kind of set of mindset that caters to the traditional finance folk. So what they want is essentially to bring the traditional finance experience that they have into the Bitcoin world and mold the Bitcoin industry in this framework. Which quite a few Bitcoiners do not agree with. And this is precisely why there will be and is forming a second type of economy, of Bitcoin economy, called the which I normally refer to as the non-compliant. So the former one, the traditional finance guy economy, is the compliant economy, and the non-traditional finance type of economy that is forming, the more anarchic or anarcho-capitalistic type of Bitcoin economy, is essentially non-compliant. So the non-compliant economy is nothing new, of course. Shadow economies have existed for as long as so-called white or legal economies existed as well. As a matter of fact, if you take the circulation of cash, the physical cash in any country, you know that physical cash is used for a lot of the shadow economy because physical cash is untraceable. You can it's essentially a peer-to-peer currency because you can pass it along from one person to another without the third-party institution, and that's why things like Craigslist selling and buying is a shadow economy. And yes, of course, it also includes outright black markets for illegal goods and services, which is also a shadow underground economy that is operating with monetary tools that are either not under the government control or controlled by the government, but not. I would say that their ability to spot these transactions is not very good. So the non-compliant Bitcoin economy is developing in front of our eyes. Obviously, there are people who just trade with each other, completely bypassing all kinds of laws. Because if we speak honestly, it is extremely difficult for any government or any agency to control Bitcoin inflows and outflows, Bitcoin transactions, especially for what they call non-KYC Bitcoin. Non-KYC Bitcoin, for those of you who are not sure what it is essentially Bitcoins that are bought in places or from individuals where you don't have to provide your identifying information like your passport, your driver's license, and things like that. Essentially, it's Bitcoins that you can buy anonymously, and those you can buy off of peer-to-peer markets such as HODL HODL. You can buy them at Bitcoin ATMs. You can buy them from someone else with cash or with even with a bank transfer if the other party, the seller, does not ask for your identifying information. Those are non-KYC Bitcoins, and because the KYC'd Bitcoins are essentially tracked because if you know anything about the compliant Bitcoin market, there is a bunch of companies that deal with so-called chain analytics, blockchain analysis. And these companies try, at least I think try is a good word because I don't think they're extremely good at it, but they invent all kinds of heuristics to identify where Bitcoins come from, who they belong to, and where they go, and at which amounts. So these companies, they work tightly with financial services providers in the Bitcoin industry, like Bitcoin exchanges, Bitcoin brokerages, and they also work with government agencies, including police and all kinds of three-letter agencies that allow these agencies to have a better idea of how the Bitcoin economy circulates. So the non-compliant economy, on the other hand, does not have these actors. These actors, like chain analytics companies, they still monitor the whole blockchain for all the money movements out there. But if they see transactions that are not tied to any identity because those bitcoins were not purchased at any place that they actually know, like an exchange, then they can't really do anything. All they see is bitcoins changing hands, but those hands are essentially anonymous. If you know about Bitcoin, Bitcoin is not completely anonymous, it's more like a pseudonymous, meaning that all transactions in the ledger are visible for the whole world to see, but you cannot tie transactions and UTXOs, unspent transaction outputs, to a particular individual, unless that individual provides KYC documentation to, let's say, an exchange, and then that exchange employs the services of a chain analytics companies. Then more or less the identity of a particular wallet address is established, and then you can be more or less sure that if that person sends money to another entity and that entity sends somewhere else, like you can track the history of transactions. Why am I talking about all this is because I wanted to draw a parallel here with the parallel society that we're going to talk about, and the parallel economy in Bitcoin. As a matter of fact, the parallel Bitcoin economy is essentially comprised of a growing number of individuals who are not happy with the way the compliant economy is going, because obviously the compliant economy has so many rules and so many barriers and so many regulations that it's very, very difficult for some people to comply with. They don't have to be criminals, they don't have to have any nefarious plans, but sometimes it's just difficult to comply with and even when it comes to business, for example. A very good example is that when there is an industry and you put a lot of barriers to entry in this industry, which is usually done with the help of larger players in that industry, you of course prevent smaller players from coming into this industry and creating good competition for the incumbents. This is what happens in the compliant Bitcoin economy. I think it's going to only grow as well. It's not going to go away. It will probably grow, but at the same time, parallel to it, the non-compliant Bitcoin economy will keep growing too, because as you know, Bitcoin does not require permission. Bitcoin users don't actually need permission to use the Bitcoin network. It's as easy as downloading software, and Yes, there may be some attempts to outlaw and ban these type of transactions, but I don't think it will actually happen. Some countries may try this trick, and the expected result is that a lot of Bitcoiners will actually flee those countries to other countries that will be more flexible in terms of Bitcoin regulation, that will be a little more open to these types of people. And as a matter of fact, those flexible countries will actually make a lot of money because obviously Bitcoin will be successful. It is already hugely successful, and it will only keep growing. And those people will become rich, and they will be part of that new country. And I think any country that plans to make Bitcoin illegal or make Bitcoin transactions that are not KYC'd illegal is set to shoot itself in the foot. So I highly do not recommend it. So when I talk about a parallel society would actually include the non-compliant Bitcoin economy. So the non-compliant Bitcoin economy will be a part of the parallel society, but a parallel society is something larger than just the Bitcoin economy. It has to include more things. And especially in a parallel society, I think I would refer more to the Western world because um, the Western world is seen as a little more homogeneous. Of course, other societies that are completely different from the Western world exist, but I don't think they are completely disconnected from this mainstream and global way of life right now. For example, as you may know, in some Middle Eastern countries, there's this Sharia law, which is a very, very different way of living as compared to the Western world. For example, yeah, there's all kinds of different rules and traditions in Sharia law countries, and in terms of the financial world, for example, they have no interest. Interest is completely banned there, so you cannot charge interest, and their banking system is slightly different. But again, I don't think that in today's world of globalization and in the world in which the parasites want to essentially create one massive planetary superstate that is very homogeneous, I don't think they are completely disconnected from this mainstream society. Most likely, they are still connected at the higher levels to the same banking elite, to the same political elite. So I don't think it's very, very different right now. When I talk about creating a parallel society, I talk about creating something completely different, something that has a life of its own. And there is an interesting article written by Paul Rosenberg for the International Man blog that talks about parallel societies, and he explores some history of parallel societies that have existed throughout the ages. He mentions, for example, the Hebrews, who separated from the ancient civilizations, and they survived as a parallel society, and then they came back to the West, and they delivered their base philosophy to the Western world when Rome fell. He also talks about the classical Greek civilization then that became what it became because of very different approach to things, because of parallel path that they decided to take. So there was a lot of these hundreds of these city-states, so to speak, that were scattered across the Greek archipelago, and essentially they were able to take a slightly different path, or a very different path, I must say. And because of that, they created their Greek institutions and became what we know about classical Greece today. And obviously, I would say, the most prominent example is the American experiment that Rosenberg also talks about. And when Westerners went essentially farther west and discovered America, and they started from scratch. They They started a completely new country on a piece of land that was completely unexplored, at least by them. Obviously, there were natives there, and just a couple of centuries later, we see what it's like. It's a different country, even with all its troubles today, with everything that's going on in the United States of America. It's still the world's powerhouse, right? So these are the examples of parallel societies that were somewhat disconnected from the rest of the world, and they took their own path and they developed into these powerful societies. And I think that's exactly what I'm talking about here. So, us Bitcoiners and us people who think and dream of creating these citadels, we would like to also set up these parallel societies. And citadels will be essentially homes for those parallel societies. Those city states that we build, those villages, those enclaves, and even online citadels that we build, they are going to be parallel societies that will be very different from the mainstream society. And Paul Rosenberg, in his article, also views a few paths of parallel development in today's world, and I'll quickly mention them here and see if those are actually enough or not. So the first path he sees is the cryptocurrencies, and of course, this is completely correct, and the only mention that I will make here is that it's not cryptocurrencies. It's cryptocurrency is just one Bitcoin. If obviously if you're considering other cryptocurrencies, drop this right now. Bitcoin is the only thing that you need to know about. Go back to the basics. If you haven't understood this by now, go ahead, read the Bitcoin standard. But this is not the topic we discuss here in this podcast. Bitcoin is the one and only. There can only be one. Remember that. Then he talks about the new biology, and what he means by the new biology is that the science of medicine is progressing so fast that soon we'll be able to genetically modify human beings and create all kinds of cures to diseases that we couldn't cure, things like cancer and stuff. And I do understand where he comes from. I have a little knowledge in this field. The only thing I can mention here is that is this science, is this new biology thing more about a physical and material gain for the human being, or is it more about the spiritual gain for the human being? Because if it's all about the material gain, gaining strength or supervision, or curing all disease so that you can basically live forever and things like that, I don't think that's extremely wise and extremely useful either, because you know where it's going when you decide to leave your spirit behind and focus fully on matter. This is not exactly the path that we want. A lot of the people right now don't even know what to do with their life during their whatever 60, 70, 80-year lifespan, and you're talking about hundreds of years or even thousands. That's completely insane for a human physical being to live so long. So this is a different conversation as well. So maybe we can talk about it in some other episode. And Paul also talks about homeschooling, which I completely agree with. It's totally correct. He believes that homeschooling is what's going to be the way of teaching children. It's a lot more efficient. It's more effective than public schooling. Public schooling provides a much worse experience for students, and homeschooling is a better environment, and it's better first and foremost because it shields your children from this massive indoctrination that today's children go through during these 11 or 12 years, and then another several years in college or university. So I completely agree with this. And then he also talks about space travel. Um, for some reason, although I think he comes from kind of personal experience, and as a child, he describes how he was a fan of space and space travel. I was exactly the same, and I still love space. I love to dream and think about what exists out there, and how humanity will travel to the stars. But also remember that I once wrote an article about space escapism. In short, space escapism is essentially this type of escapism when it's no different from a drug or from video games or from being an adrenaline junkie. You have to understand that a lot of people who dream about escaping to space and is essentially people who just want to escape from their own problems, their own. As Jordan Peterson would say, their own bedroom is not in order, so they don't want to clean it. They just want to escape from it, and that's what a lot of people do these days. There's all kinds of escapes in the world. There's drugs, there's sex, there's work. Workaholics do the same. There's adrenaline junkies. There's all kinds of things, and I think for a lot of people, space is one of those things too. They just live in the clouds, and one day they wish to escape this planet because they simply don't like the life here. But which is not to deride, the general direction in which the humanity moves. I think it will be pretty cool if we become an interplanetary species, and I hope that Elon Musk actually succeeds in his journey to Mars, and create a settlement, a permanent settlement there. Maybe it would be a good idea to actually die on Mars in some kind of a territory, a new unexplored territory. However, remember that we live on the most beautiful planet in this whole solar system. Maybe not in the whole galaxy, but in this solar system, it's probably most beautiful. We have air, we have oceans, we have rivers, we have mountains, we have diverse flora and fauna. We have all kinds of stuff here. And the only problem we have is that it has been taken over by the parasites, right? So what we need to do, I think, what we need to focus on is to actually take back the planet that already belonged to us before, and then we can think about space escapism. So, out of the 4 points that Paul Rosenberg mentions, I completely agree with at least two, which is Bitcoin and homeschooling. And homeschooling is strictly important, of course, just as Bitcoin, because we have to teach the next generations ourselves. We cannot trust them to third-party institutions that honestly don't have our best intentions in mind. So then we have other things that I think need to be considered in building a parallel society, because I don't think that what Paul mentioned is enough. I think it has to be a little more encompassing, and it has to encapsulate more things like an actual moral code, an actual set of ethics and ethical standards. There has to be its own culture, its own traditions. And yes, you cannot set up traditions on day one. Traditions are actually something that appear with time. They form from generation to generation. But nevertheless, the traditions have to be the focus of this parallel society, because this is how communities form. This is how communities bind together and stay together, because they have something common to share among themselves. And also, we have to really think about the spiritual development of the community members of this parallel society. And as I mentioned before, for example, in the Middle Eastern countries, they have their own parallel society, so to speak, that is based completely on the religious grounds, right? So I think we should not discount spiritual development either, because it also brings people together, and whatever citadel you build and whatever religion it is built around, or maybe there's a or maybe you have a citadel that is based purely on ethical and moral codes, and it does not care about which religion you belong to. At the very least, it still should promote religious and spiritual activities among its population, because those things, they keep the people together. If you remember, some of the ancient cities and Middle Eastern cities, Middle Age cities, were built around churches, and that is not a coincidence, and that is not surprising, because a lot of these communities were bound by this church. They were bound by their religion, and every now and then, let's say every Sunday or maybe more than once a week, they all got together. The whole village or the whole town would get together in the church for a service like mass or something like that, which kept them together. They could always meet. It's not just a spiritual event; it's also a social event. It keeps the tribe together. So this is what I think is very important in creating parallel societies. Um, we have to really build something that runs in parallel to what the globalist elite wants to actually do here. And I'm not talking about creating only one parallel society. Okay, there's this regular NPC globalist communist society, the technocracy that they want to create, and there's us, the Bitcoiners. No, I think there can be multiple parallel societies with different cultural sets, different ethics. Maybe some of them are a little more religious, others are less religious. Some of them are more into technology, others are more into kind of natural ways of living. It's all fine as long as there's parallel societies popping up around the world, and we can all see how they develop. First of all, personally, as a human being, it would be much more interesting for me to live on a planet in in a world in which there's just a bunch of different cultures. We can still see them right now, but where the world is going, where the globalists want to take it, is a world which is homogeneous, where there's no culture. Essentially, there is no roots for anybody. So we don't want that. We don't want just to preserve the existing cultures. We want to also bring back the old ones and create new ones. And this is where the movement for creation of these parallel societies comes from. We have to, as much as some of us don't like the word, we have to have diversity, but the diversity has to be separated, right? So it's not the forced diversity, forced integration as it exists in multicultural countries, so to speak. It is diversity on the whole planet. The whole planet has a diverse ecosystem of cultures, of societies, and they interact with each other, but they all kind of live their own separate lives with their own customs and rights. And this is the proper way of living, and this is how it's been for thousands and thousands, if not millions of years, and this is part of natural order. I hope you like this episode, and if you want to keep in touch, if you want to subscribe, just go to thegaia.co, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.